And we lived in the middle of nowhere in a house in the middle of the woods. He turned up out of the blue, coming from Zambia, and implied that he would make sure that I'd be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, and that he's going to put a contract on me if I didn't hand over 50% of the farm. And I got another call that I've been warned, my kids are being watched.
Welcome everybody, this is Simon Gilbo with Inspired. I'm very excited to be back with another fantastic guest. There is so much heaviness and grim news around, and the whole point of this podcast, Inspired, is to stir faith, is to share stories from different mates of mine from all sorts of different walks. That are people that have been through some challenging stuff. They take some knocks in life, as we all do, and yet are still in the fight, still journeying on and seeing God at work in their lives. Now, I have zero doubt that you're going to be blown away and inspired by this week, because it's a podcast I've been looking forward to doing for ages, and it's just been a question of finding the right timing. It's with a friend of mine. I guess we probably go back about 7 years. Martin, do you reckon?
I think, it's about 7 or 8 years. That's right.
So welcome everybody to Martin Zuch. Martin, it's interesting as a way of introduction. I think I'd say that basically for a lot of those 7 years of me knowing Martin, he was largely pretty depressed. He had major financial issues. He'd gone through a really difficult divorce, was struggling to pay school fees for kids coming out of that. He has an extraordinary story out of, I think at his peak, making sort of £1 million a month as a hedge fund manager, and then sort of largely losing all of that, and challenges with drink. I mean, there's a lot to unpack. Get ready, strap yourselves in, and get ready for a really beautiful, redemptive story. So, Martin, listen, buddy, I actually, we've talked about all sorts of heavy stuff over the years, but I don't know much about your childhood. So, go on, let's kick off.
Right. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me, Simon. And I'm glad we found this time. And I think your synopsis there, you've told the story, so I don't have to say very much else. But here we go. Yeah, with the childhood, I'm from Hertfordshire, a small village in Hertfordshire called Aldenham. And I'm the son of refugees. Both my parents are German. My father was at one point a Luftwaffe pilot. He was in the Second World War. And he was taken prisoner of war and in America. And then instead of going back to Germany, he got off the boat, I think it was in Liverpool, and he stayed in the UK for a number of reasons, actually. It was dangerous for him to go back to Germany. So, but that's another story. So he ended up in Hertfordshire. And my mother, she came over basically to meet a man, because all the men were pretty much gone in Germany. And they met at a Lutheran church in London. And that's how they got together. And so I've got three older sisters. And I was brought up in that little village. And my mother took me to church as a kid. My father wasn't that interested, but my mother took me to church. We went to an evangelical church, and I sort of sat through it. And did that for most of my childhood. Had a good childhood, I'd say, in a little village in those days with no mobile phones and not much TV, and just really enjoyed the outdoor life. I didn't have much to do with my father. He wasn't really a fatherly figure to me. I don't think he really got over the Second World War. It really impacted him. But my mother was a loving mother. And as I said, she took me to church, and I went until I could leave, which was about at the age of 15. And I ran as quick as I could. I wasn't interested. I was more interested in getting on in life and meeting girls and making something of my life. And that was my childhood.
Any key dramatic incidences in your teens?
I wouldn't say there was anything traumatic. My father was quite interested in drinking, and I had a few bad memories from that, but nothing that traumatic. No, it was a good upbringing. It was stable. We didn't have loads and loads of money, but it was a stable, good upbringing. So yeah, I'm quite, I've got good memories from it.
So did you sort of really want to make loads of money because you didn't have much money, do you think?
That may have been the reason. I left school at 16 with no qualifications. I couldn't make it work. I went to a comprehensive school. I really had no ability. I felt I had no abilities whatsoever, and felt like a bit of a failure because my sisters were quite clever. And so from then on, I really wanted to do as well as I could. And I got a local job in Watford for a year and then left and moved into London at the age of 17, I think it was, moved to Notting Hill Gate and worked as a computer operator. Computers in those days were the size of a house. And,
Yes.
and I did that for 2 or 3 years and got paid really well. And then at the age of 21, some friends who had a business said they thought I'd make a good salesman. So I took a job with them, with their company, and I got given a brand new Ford Escort, a red Ford Escort Mark II. And I thought I was on top of the world then.
Wow.
I went around London selling electronic weighing scales to businesses where you put your post on it and you measure how much it's going to cost you to send a letter or a parcel. And that was my first job in selling. So from there, I sort of went on to other selling jobs, telephone systems and things like that, until at the age of 27, I went to Merrill Lynch and was selling them a telephone system. And they said that I would make a good stockbroker selling stocks and shares to their clients. So that's when I got into the financial world.
And I'm trying to remember from our private conversations, didn't you have to blag your way massively to get this breakthrough job?
You remember well. Because I had no qualifications and they only took people that had degrees. I had already told them I had O-levels and A-levels, which I didn't have. They made me sit an aptitude test. And so I went down into the basement of, it was in Bond Street actually, and they gave me these papers for this test. And I had a calculator on the table that said, you can't use a calculator. I said, oh, right. So they took it away from me. But then I had one of those little calculators in my wallet, you know, the card ones, like credit cards.
Yeah.
So I took it out of my wallet and I stuck it in between my legs and I did all the calculations on that. And then I had various interviews through the day. And at the end of the day, sat there with the boss and he said, look, I've got good news for you. You've passed the interviews and we're going to offer you a job. And congratulations. And by the way, you failed your aptitude test, but we're going to look past that because we think you've got the potential. So even with my little calculator, I failed the test.
Oh, good. Well, that's good that, in a sense, your cheating bit didn't actually pay off.
No, it didn't pay off.
And so, go on, tell us briefly how you just rode this wave of, coalescing sort of factors that meant that you just absolutely flew.
Well, they then sent me to Princeton in America, where they have a university, they call it their own Merrill Lynch University. And I was there for a while and had to take various exams. One of them was a 7-hour exam in the Westminster Central Hall opposite Parliament, and that was called, it's the New York Stock Exchange exam, Series 7. And I cheated in that one. I copied the guy next to me, and I passed, obviously. And then there was the London Stock Exchange exam, which I didn't cheat, and I found it was really, really hard for me, but I passed it. And then another exam I took when I was in New York was the Chicago, it's called Series 3, the Chicago Exchange exam. I failed that, but because they spent so much money on me, they said, we'll give you another chance. So they sort of picked me up in a big limousine, took me to the Grace building in New York, went to the top floor, took the exam on a computer, and I passed. So I managed to do all the exams and get through. And eventually I became a private banker for Merrill Lynch and started dealing in stocks and shares and banking instruments and stuff like that, and working for that organization and really, really cracking it and enjoying life. Lived in a nice apartment in Swiss Cottage, Hampstead, and did that for 5 years and did it successfully. Won some awards, got sent to New York to, on various trips because we did well. Me and my partner at Merrill Lynch, we did well. And it was quite funny because the sort of people I was working with, they were Eton educated and all had degrees and all the rest of it. And they used to call me Pike. Do you remember? Do you remember Pike from Dad's Army?
Yeah, go on.
Pike was a bit thick, and so they called me Pike. And it didn't bother me because I sold more than they did, and I made more commission than they did for whatever reason. So in a way, I was more successful, but they still used to call me Pike. So I had a lot of fun there. And then after 5 years, I had an opportunity to leave with one of my clients. And that's when things really did start steaming ahead.
Go on. So what did it look like? And just explain the sort of the technical thing in layman's terms for us to see how you just, how can you end up making £1 million a month?
Well, that was only for a short period of time, actually. I mean, I did the job for a long time, but I had 1 year where, we made an abundance. I think, it was around 10 million or something for that 1 year. But what I used to do is focus on just IPOs, initial public offerings. So when companies come to the market, we would apply for the stock, and then we would get given the stock on the first day of trading and sell the stock on the first day of trading, so that there was no risk. And but I did it in an abundance, in a huge volume, big scale. So I eventually had lots of people working with me and for me that would apply for the stock on my behalf. Different companies that we set up all around the world. We had offices in Switzerland and Hong Kong and everywhere, with people in those offices applying for this stock. I'd have a website which would tell the people that worked with us what stock they could apply for, which ones would go up, which ones would go down and to avoid, and which ones were average. And so it's very, very simple. And it's a strategy a model that we used, but it only worked for a period of time. It worked for about 10 years. It doesn't really work the same way now. So it was, there was a window of opportunity at the time, and I was in that fortunate position to be there at that time. So we set this operation up where you would apply for stock and the stock would come in. And early in the morning, I'd be told I've got 10,000 shares of this particular stock or 20,000 shares. I remember when Google was floated on the New York Stock Exchange, I think it was about $90 at the time. And we got 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 shares. I can't remember exactly, but it would double or it would triple. So you could make, 50, 100,000, 150,000 in one day. So you would make silly money, really, really silly money. And we had probably about 40 agents working for us, me and my partner, and they would be applying for this stock all around the world, and it would come in, and at 2:30 when the market opens, New York time, would be selling the stock, and the day could be over after 2 hours or 3 hours. It was a crazy, crazy time, which led to a crazy lifestyle because the money was so abundant.
Go on, give us a few of your, top or low moments or high moments of debauchery or whatever, without glorifying it. But it is interesting, isn't it?
Well, it is, yeah. I mean, it's crazy. And, I was living in a 5-story house in Chelsea off the King's Road, and I had a house in Verbier, or a penthouse apartment in Verbier, and a house in Portugal. And I was sort of living this crazy life and partied pretty much all of the time. For some bizarre reason, at one point, I had a United Nations tank, which I used to drive around Chelsea, and I got a parking permit for it. And because I told them it had a Rolls-Royce engine, so I said it was a vintage Rolls-Royce. I got a permit for about 9 months. I had it on the road, and it had a little turret with a machine gun in it and stuff. I mean, it was immature and crazy, but good fun at the time. But eventually, the council made me remove it from the street. And also at the time, I had a bar in Notting Hill Gate, or a share of a bar called Jack's, and I put the tank in front of Jack's, and that attracted a few people and what have you. But yeah, did some crazy stuff. Slightly embarrassed to say on a podcast what I did, but I will. Like driving a car into a swimming pool, and this one's awful. Driving around Sloane Square with nothing on, with a Browning machine gun under my arm. For a bet. And
was that drug induced, or?
Yeah, not drug necessarily, but booze induced, I think. And then things like, 2 years in a row, I would get a private jet to Monaco, to Monte Carlo, to the Grand Prix with four or five people, I think it was 7 people we got in the jet, 7 of the best performers, and have a riot there, and that was my life. I went back and forth from to the offices in London and to my place in Switzerland because, as I said, I wasn't paying tax, and so I was offshore, as it were, and only could stay in the UK for 90 days. And so I went back and forth. That was my life. Yeah, it was fascinating. So also, whilst I was living in Switzerland, I received this letter from the Inland Revenue, with a demand for 25 million, a tax bill for 25 million, because they thought I was living in the UK when I was actually living in Switzerland, but I didn't even earn anywhere near that much to pay that much anyway. It was bizarre. And then 3 weeks later, I got another letter from them saying, sorry, they made a mistake with the tax bill. It's not 25 million, it's 35 million, because we haven't included interest and charges. So I went through a 7-year tax investigation whilst a Christian, actually, and had to go through every detail of the days when I was in the country, not in the country. And it turned out that I genuinely was in the country, in the UK, too long by about 25 days over 5 years. And I had to pay a bill of around £500,000 just to settle that. So they're the sort of things that went on, and they were really, really testing for me. And to tell the truth for a start, and also, testing with regards to fear and anxiety. And it was a difficult time for me and my family and my wife, so it wasn't easy. But these sort of things that went on.
Yeah. So your eventual encounter with Jesus, did that come from just having the whole world in a way, but feeling a deep sense of emptiness, I'm guessing?
No, it didn't. No, I wasn't looking for Jesus. People search and stuff and they find him. I was hijacked. And
go on.
And I'll tell you how, and then I can explain to you why as well afterwards. But I was just living my lifestyle, my crazy lifestyle as I was. And I was in Switzerland, and a friend of mine out there who did a similar job to me said his brother is a vicar, and he was coming over to do a 2-week chaplaincy in Verbier, where I lived. Would I like to come and meet him and have a cup of coffee? And I thought, yeah, okay, I'll come and meet him. So I met up with him, and I really liked the guy. He was the vicar of a church in Reading. John O'Wilmot was his name.
A good family friend.
Really?
Yeah. He's godfather to one of my sisters.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. That's brilliant. So he came to speak, and I met him for a coffee, and I thought, wow, I really like this guy. There's something about him I really like. There was this presence around him, this aura. And he said, why don't you come to chapel tomorrow? So I said, yeah, I'll do that. I'll see how I feel in the morning, but I'll do that. Next morning came, and as I was walking down the hill to the chapel, I was totally overcome by the power of God and by his Holy Spirit.
Wow.
In a way that was almost like a vision. I met with Jesus. I didn't hear him audibly, but I met with Jesus. And Jesus basically said to me, everything that you learned as a kid, and everything I knew as a Sunday school kid was real. Jesus was real. And he was there to be with me. And my mind, everything became light and clear. And there was this warmth in my body, which I couldn't really explain. And it was a real encounter with God. And I often look back and think, how real was it? But it was real enough to certainly change my life from that moment on. And I remember thinking that day, I don't even remember going into the chapel or speaking to Jono. I know I did that week because he was there for 2 weeks, but my encounter with God was not through anybody else. It was just through God. It was God and me.
Yeah.
And I remember going back home that night thinking, tomorrow when I wake up, all this is going to go. And I'm going to just feel the same as I did previously. And I woke up the next day, and I still had that feeling and that presence and that knowledge of knowing that Jesus is who Jesus really is. And so that was amazing. And what I was trying to explain earlier is I wasn't seeking God. I wasn't sort of, had so much of everything that I was desperate to find out more. I believe that the prayers of my mother, I know she prayed for me every day, and the prayers of my mother were answered, that I came back to Jesus or came to Jesus, because I never really, I left at the age of 15, 16 to do what I wanted to do and made my own way. And I believe that her prayers were answered, and Jesus, he came into my life through her prayers.
That's a real encouragement, isn't it? I mean, for those of us that are going through the mill in terms of our kids not necessarily making the best choices or wondering from what we would particularly want them to. I'm sure that speaks to loads of people, and it's an encouragement for just to press on in prayer. Like I pray every day of the life of my kids, and I know that I was prayed for every day. And I also love the fact that your Sunday school, your teachers, whoever they were, it's nothing is wasted, is it? And
No.
that would be encouragement to people that are involved in youth work and kids work. And I find it fascinating in your story that you weren't looking, but that
No.
God is faithful in answering prayer. Anyway, I feel like I interrupted the flow, but keep on going.
No.
So you had this experience of God, didn't you? But in Jesus, but that needed to be fleshed out in terms of discipleship. How did that work?
It did. And just going back to your point about the kids, yeah. And I pray for my kids every day. I've got 3 kids, pray for them every day, and I'm confident that I'll see them in glory, whatever happens between now and then. So, but anyway, yeah, discipleship and all the rest of it. Well, 3 weeks later, I had friends staying over from London. In fact, they were aristocrats that I knew from the past. And I was woken at 3 a.m, and I was filled with the Holy Spirit in the middle of the night. And I was speaking in tongues, and it was kind of uncontrollable. The walls in my apartment, this particular apartment, were thin, and they were next door, and I was embarrassed, and I was under the covers. And after about, I think, 40 minutes or an hour, I said to the Lord, stop, please stop this.
Not being funny, but no drugs involved at this stage?
Nothing like that at all. No, completely clear. And so that was another move that came to me by God. It wasn't prayed for, it just came to me. And then I suppose my discipleship and my journey started then. I went to Alpha, so I flew to London every week to go to Alpha. I volunteered for Besom, which is a charity in Clapham at the time, and I flew back just for that day that I volunteered. I think it was once every couple of weeks and stuff. And
were you married at this point?
I wasn't. No, I wasn't married at that point. No. And so I did what, I went to HTB. I became very good friends with Charlie Mackesy at the very beginning, who he's quite well known as you all know now with his book and stuff. And he was really helpful, and he came to see me in Verbier a few times, and we struck up a great relationship. Yeah, and slowly I began to change. I mean, I say literally slowly, it was slowly. I mean, one minute I was in a club partying and snorting cocaine and drinking. The next minute I was in church. That is what happened, I'm afraid. But that went. But I did slowly change. And then a few years later, I realized that I could no longer stay in the financial world, not because there's anything wrong with the financial world at all, but because of the things that it would make me do.
Right.
And I felt it was time to get out. And I sort of handed over my business. I made a decision to hand over my business to partners that I had, didn't even ask for any money for it. And I got the opportunity to start some projects in Africa. I had some connections. People were moving from Zimbabwe at the time, going into Zambia because they were being kicked out by Mugabe. And there was an opportunity to buy a piece of land, an old farm there in the copper belt in the north of Zambia. And also I negotiated a huge tract of land in Livingston, right near Victoria Falls, 3,000 hectares I got from the government through a bishop in London helped me negotiate the deal. And I ended up with 2 huge pieces of land, and then developed the land into banana plantations and wheat growing fields and various other crops. And that was my first move into what I thought was the right thing to do as a Christian. So I invested in these 2 major farm projects to the tune of around $3 million or more, I think, actually. And I also built a school in a very, very poor area in the Copper Belt, and started with 60 kids, started at grade 1. And so every year we would take on 60 kids, and then next year take on another 60 kids and go up to where we are now at grade 9. So now we're currently at 370 kids. So I had the school running. I had these 2 farms running. We were producing 30 tons of bananas a day. One of the farms at the smaller farm in the Copper Belt, and the other farm was producing wheat and all kinds of stuff. So I had a huge loan with Barclays Bank of about, I think, 3 or 4 million. Then it went up more because we couldn't pay the interest back on the loan. And eventually, I think it was 2009, 2010, the bank pulled the loan. And therefore, I had to hand the farm over to the bank. I was left with a smaller farm that had a loan, but I managed to cover that through friends. And that farm contracted a banana disease that I couldn't control. And then I had problems. The biggest problem was this, one of the guys that I worked with that actually introduced me to Zambia. We fell out for a number of reasons, mainly financial. And he threatened me. I was living in Northumberland. I was married. I had 3 small kids. And he turned up out of the blue, coming from Zambia, and turned up at my doorstep and checked me over to make sure I didn't have a camera or a listening device or something. And why would I? I didn't even know he was going to come. And implied that he would make sure that I'd be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, and that he's going to put a contract on me if I didn't hand over 50% of the farm that was still in existence and hadn't been given back to Barclays Bank. And then just disappeared. And it was a serious threat because of the background of this particular chap. And I called the police immediately, and they tried to do something about it, and they couldn't because there's no proof of anything. And I called my pastor at the time, and he came round and sort of spoke to me. I remember him saying that scripture that if somebody takes your jacket, give him your shirt. So it was implying I should hand over the rest of the farm. And I did eventually, but not at that time. And so I had a really difficult few months. And then I got another call. And we lived in the middle of nowhere in a house in the middle of the woods. And I got another call from a Far Eastern sounding person, really threatening that I've been warned and I've only got one warning left. And my kids are being watched. And they know where we are and what they're doing and what school they're going to. And we can see what you're doing now. And if you don't hand over this farm, we will take action. And then after that, I'd had enough, and I was frightened. And I got the kids and the family together, and we moved into my sister-in-law's, and we all 5 of us were in one bedroom for 2 weeks. And I remember having so much peace when I went in that bedroom. I couldn't believe it. I was so peaceful. And eventually I handed the farm over. I was offered a deal, but I thought I can't work with somebody like that. And the only deal that I got was next to the land was the school, which had 10 hectares. So I ended up with 50 hectares and 10 hectares for the school and another 40 hectares to do some arable stuff with for the school. And of course, the schools to this that was 2010, and here we are in 2023. I've still got the school, still running it, and there's 370 kids, and so it's been an amazing blessing. And so, even though I lost 2 major farms, the thing is, there was nothing there before. It was just bushland, and both those farms, still exist now, and have employed thousands of people in that time. So they just don't belong to me. That's the only difference. So, God used that. But I remember when I made the decision this is embarrassing, but when I made the decision to take the one at Livingston, I liked the area. I was going to build a great big white mansion for myself on the land with big Corinthian columns. And I was a prideful person. I still thought that everything I touched turned to gold. Yeah. And I just got taken to pieces over these farms, got taken to pieces. I got dismantled. I was on my knees. I was perplexed. There's that scripture that, what is it now? We're troubled.
Perplexed, not destroyed, persecuted, not abandoned, struck down. Yeah. 2 Corinthians 4.
But having said that, it says, but not in despair. I was in despair. But I just didn't know what to do. And I prayed and I prayed. I was depressed. I slept a lot in the afternoons. I didn't turn to drinking or anything like that. I kept well away from it. I kind of made this pact in my Christianity, because I drank so much previously. I decided not to. And for around 8 or 9 years, I didn't drink at all, or maybe 3 or 4 times a year on special occasions. And even that period of my life, I didn't turn to drink. I just, focused on God. And whilst I was losing the farms through bankruptcy and stuff, I was offered the opportunity to go to university in Northumbria and do a master's degree in community well-being in disaster and development. Now, they know I didn't have any qualifications, but I was invited to do it, and they said they would help me. So I turned up at university with no qualifications whatsoever, had no experience, and really frightened the living daylights of me. But lots of people helped me, including my now ex-wife. And there was only 4 people on my course, and one of them was a guy called Tilahan Tesfaye. He was Ethiopian. He worked for World Vision, and he took a year out. And we got on really well. He was a Christian. He came to live with us, and he really helped me as well. And at the end of the course, it ended up that we started, we had Give Hope. I had Give Hope Zambia, which is the school and the projects there, the ministry there. And we started Give Hope Ethiopia. And so he started working for that full time in Ethiopia, getting kids off the street, putting them in education. It still runs now, and it educates and helps thousands of kids a year. And it's amazing what God can do out of a complete and utter disaster.
Yeah.
Because the longevity of this stuff has been incredible. That's been 13 years now.
Yeah. Hey folks, I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I'm loving the response we're getting from across the world. It's just wonderful to see how encouraging and inspiring it is being and hitting the spot. Listen, if you are being blessed by it, I'd love it. Basically, this happens under the auspices of our ministry, Great Lakes Outreach, which works in the poorest and the hungriest country in the world, which is Burundi. We're having an incredible impact in the toughest of circumstances. We want to carry on supporting those local folks doing a great job. So if you wanted to, greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. You could make a donation there. I'd so appreciate it. Also, it's word of mouth, isn't it? So gossip these podcasts to other people, get them to subscribe, give us a great review. Absolutely wonderful. So grateful to you. So that's greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. If you want to do a monthly, a couple of quid a month, or a one-off donation, we'd be incredibly grateful. All right, now let's get back to the podcast. Now, you mentioned your ex-wife, and it's tricky talking about the stuff on the podcast when it's going to go in the public domain. So I know you've got to be wise, but I know it's been really tough. And I picture you. I remember you saying how you'd be sort of early doors, 6 a.m, with your mug of cocoa by the Arga, just praying for her, and you just went on the same page. Is that right?
That is right. Yeah. When we got married, she didn't have the same opinion or feelings as I did for Christianity. And I got up early in the morning, and I used to sit by this big old Arga because it's so cold up in Northumberland. And I've been doing Bible in a year now for about 14 years. And I have to do it because I've got such a bad memory. I can there's only one memory verse that I can remember, and that's John 3:16. So I have to be in the Word every day, otherwise I'll forget it straight away. And so I would do that. I would write my prayers as well as my journal. I still write my journal, but I would write my prayers because when it comes to praying, my concentration is 60 seconds max. So I'd have to write everything down. And of course, I would pray for my wife every single day. And and unfortunately and very sadly, things didn't work out. And that fell apart just over 7 years ago as a great shock to me. And it really impacted me hard. It impacted me harder than losing the farms and the financial implications that I had the years earlier. And in many ways, I can see why she didn't want to stay, because I was living this crazy life of this God thing that I had in my head and trying to change the world and all the rest of it. I literally was trying to change the world. And she left, and that really caused me a huge amount of grief and distress. Yeah.
And that's when we met. You were sort of with our mutual top buddy, Justin Hill, who's also one of my trustees, and twice divorced himself. So there's you divorced. You're both. I think he was going through his divorce at the same time as the second one, and you were sort of brothers in arms in your own brokenness. And so that is literally until pretty much last year. We've always gotten really well, but you have been in a bad place until recently, haven't you?
I have been in a bad place. I even went back to drinking, and it's funny because I didn't when I had all those death threats and stuff, but I did when I lost my wife and didn't have the kids full time and had to spend, I was in court numerous times with regards to having a fair share of the children, 50-50. And Justin did help. I spent 5 years with him. I spent 50% of the time driving down from Newcastle to Harpenden every other week, and we helped each other. And I remember we'd get up early in the mornings, and there's a book that we went through, a book called what's it called now? Inside Out by Larry Crabb, which are trying to sort of just rediscover ourselves, see where we've gone wrong, and try and get ourselves right. And we went through a lot of painful thinking together, and we helped each other out, so that it was good in many, many ways. But fortunately, I've come through that now. It's still hard, but I've come through it, and things are turning out better. But I think what I haven't really got into was what happened when I lost the bananas in 2010.
Yeah, so go on.
So I did my dissertation on the impact of beekeeping in local communities in areas in Zambia. And because I obviously had experience in Zambia, and it's a project that I was currently, at that time I was looking at with a friend of mine called John Enright, who was a Methodist missionary, because he said it's something that he thought could work on a large scale. And I decided to put that into play by investing another big chunk of money. So I remortgaged the house and put that into this beekeeping operation to scale up building beehives, flat pack beehives, and shipping them out into the bush, handing them out to local communities. And we give 10 hives to each family. And then we harvest from each family twice a year, so they get an income. It took us 2 years to get this model absolutely right. And it's a model that was different from anything else, because we hang the hives high up in the tree with this mechanism of a bamboo stick and a pulley mechanism and all the rest of it. And then we harvest twice a year, so we get a summer harvest and a winter harvest. And it ended up, we were building a lot of hives each day, like 150 beehives a day. And to date, we've built close to over 120,000 beehives.
Mind blowing.
Now, we've lost about 30,000 of them through trial and error and destruction and theft. But we've most definitely, and we still do, impact, I would say, probably over 7,000 families.
Beautiful.
And even though the structure of that business has changed over the years, we're looking at a contract from a big American organization, a charity. They're going to sponsor us, hopefully, to build another 50,000 beehives next year, which will take about 18 months to implement. And that will impact another 5,000 lives.
And so, these numbers are staggering. Love it.
But they are. So, out of the ashes from the farms and the disasters, not only have we got the school and have we got Ethiopia, but we've now got all this honey, millions of jars of honey. And a lot of this has happened whilst I've been in the deepest of despair and while my life has been in turmoil. So it's quite bizarre how things actually can work out like that. And that business has grown and grown whilst, my divorce happened and what have you. And then it got to a point that we've got all this honey. We want to tell the story because it's a great story. So 4 or 5 years ago, I set up a brand called Mamabuchi, which stands for Mother Honey in local Bemba, which is the local dialect in the Copper Belt. And so we have this honey now that we're trying to sell and put on the shelves of the supermarkets, because at the moment we sell our honey in shipping containers to the likes of Pick and Pay and other places in South Africa and all around the world, actually. We're shipping it to America, we're shipping it to Norway and Switzerland and places. But it doesn't, it still impacts the people on the ground, but we could make more impact if we had our own brand. We'd make significantly more profit. And we're getting there. You know, I've got 300 shops coming up now in America, and the potential of thousands of shops in Germany and Switzerland and France, which I'm working on at the moment. And then in the UK, we've got Whole Foods. Not many in the UK, because a lot of people in the UK buy supermarket honey, which isn't necessarily real honey. It's been heated and it doesn't have the goodness in it, and the enzymes have been killed. But educating people is difficult. So yeah, we've now got this honey brand called Mama Bucci. We've got 1.5 million jars of honey available every year. And
brilliant.
It's something that I'm working on now with Bear Grylls is getting heavily involved now. And we've got meetings in a few weeks' time with him and his team because they really want to make it work. Charlie Mackes has been really helpful. He's redesigned our jar by doing the head. You know, he's doing the graphics and all the rest of it. And then,
just to say, for those who don't know, because you mentioned Charlie twice now, for those who don't know, he's the guy that did the alpha artwork, and also recently he has become mega famous through his book, which I've got. What's it called? The Mole, the Horse, the Boy. Anyway, it's probably the biggest selling book in lockdown, isn't it? So he's a very talented artist.
Bestseller globally, all around the world. And I think the book's in 20 different languages as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to say, it is, I mean, I've tasted it. This is a personal endorsement, whatever that means, but it is proper best honey in the world, isn't it? It's natural. It's like, as you say, it's not added with all this.
No, well, it's amazing. It's not, it's not just me saying it or you saying it. It's won 2 gold stars in the Great Taste Awards. So
brilliant.
It's fabulous honey. It's absolutely brilliant. And I really believe that it's going to become a global brand because we have the volume, we have the quantity.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be something really special. But we're still at the
brother, you've prayed it, haven't you? You've prayed it in. It's been such a long battle. Well, and I just wanted to add that I love the different pieces of a puzzle because and how God has woven the tapestry of our lives together. Because it was, how long was it? A year ago that you came to a gathering of mates of mine, and you came across what is now a fabulous mutual mate. She was my mate, but she's now also very close to you, Jo Bicknell, and she was definitely a key piece in the puzzle, wasn't she?
Yeah, so completely. I mean, a year ago when I met you at that garden party, I just didn't know what to do because I was struggling with Mama Bucci, the brand, but I knew I should stick with it because God gave me the promises through prophetic words from people that didn't even know me, and 2 very clear prophetic words from people literally that didn't know me. I mean, that's another story. But so I just stuck with it, and then I met with Jo after not having seen her since she was a teenager. So maybe 20, 30 years. And we connected. She asked me to show me the honey jars, which I had in the back of the car. I showed it to her and she said, well, that's crap. Anyway, we need to do something about that. And she said, come and see me in 2 weeks' time. So 2 weeks later, I went to see her. She had this whole strategy and this whole idea of what could be done with the label, the branding, and all the rest of it. And then I got to tell her more about the story, like I'm telling you all now here. And she bought into it, and she brought the team in. Her friends came in, and I've had that support for the last year. I spent the last year in Berkhamsted at their offices.
And if you knew Jo Bicknell, she is a kick-butt, successful, driven,
absolutely
superb businesswoman, isn't she?
Incredible, absolutely incredible. And she's got me into America and various other places. And we've done 2 shows since I've met her, which have been successful. And as I said, we've got a meeting all together with Bear and his group in 2 weeks' time. And so I can't imagine what's going to happen now. I just can't imagine.
Which is why, in a sense, we waited this long to do the podcast, because we could have done it last year. I mean, the story of the honey and the school and kids being empowered for education, be it in Ethiopia or Zambia, that's a story to be told anyway, plus your crazy background. But we were longing to see this critical breakthrough, which has now happened and will hopefully go absolutely stratospheric for the kingdom. And I just want to salute you for hanging on in there. And also, it's all grace, isn't it? God has done it, and you give all glory to him.
God's done it. God has definitely done it, not me, because all the stuff I planned and I wanted fell apart. That got dismantled, and God did the bits that he wanted to do. And so, it's very clear. That's 100% clear.
Mate, it's such a cool story. It's so unique, but there are even strands that people will be able to relate to in terms of their own journeys. Listen, time's pretty much up. I don't want us to miss out any jewels from you, any lessons learned that we haven't touched on that you want to impart, anything you want to plug, just go for it.
Well, I think that the lessons, I made a lot of mistakes because I had too many choices. Because I was financially wealthy, I had too many choices. I didn't have the opportunity to get on my knees until I was made to get on my knees. And that's what I found. And that's what I'm finding almost on a daily basis. I do have to get on my knees. It's not necessarily a lesson, but it's just what happened to me. And I'm glad it's happened. I'm so glad it's happened. And God's really saved me through that. But I think with regards to support, if people got online onto, just look up Mama Bucci, Mama Bucci, Buci. And if we could be followed, that would really help us on Instagram. And then you can buy honey online. That would be great support. So anything like that, I would really appreciate that support. It'd be really helpful. And of course, prayer as to where we go in the future. We want to sell this honey all around the world. The more honey that we sell in our own brand, the more we can put back to Zambia and make a difference. So I really appreciate that.
And you're going to scale up to how many hives, do you think?
I would hope that within the next 24 months, we can get to 200,000 beehives. I think that within 2 years, we could be up to 1,000 tons of honey, which is 3 million jars. So wow. Of the best honey, of the very best honey. And you know how many times honey is mentioned in the Bible? I mean, it's prolific. It's there.
Yeah.
And it's even mentioned in the Quran, actually. It says it cures 99% of all diseases, but I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that.
That's fine. Oh, mate, what a treat. Well, we were on holiday a few weeks back in Corfu, and your boy Louis has been on camp with my boy Zach. There's loads of personal connections, and I've prayed with you. I prayed for you and the kids every week since we met, pretty much, and I'm just so excited to see where the Lord's taking you and to be part of your journey and keeping you grounded, so we don't revisit the mistakes of the younger Martin Zuch.
Yeah.
And yeah, but just keep on going, bro. And all glory to your faithful God.
Yeah, I've missed out so much, but I think, I've given you all a rough idea of what's been going on.
All right. Well, listen, everybody. I'll put the blurb on Mama Bucci. It's funny. Bucci is not funny, but because of Bantu languages in general, we're further up in Burundi, and for us, it's Buki. But it's the same old root stuff, honey. Yeah. And so do get that. We've loved it. And please give us a great review on Spotify, iTunes, so that more people get to see it, gossip it, pass it on to other people. We've got a WhatsApp group, which is on the blurb. If you want to get these to you by WhatsApp, it makes it a whole lot easier to forward to other people. Spread the word. I mean, I'm like, just about everywhere I'm speaking, people are coming up and saying, I've got my 5 colleagues listening to this. It's just beautiful, because we do need to hear good news, inspiring stories of triumphant faith. Goodness, Martin's been through the mill, but he's hung on in there, and that's a classic example. Loads of lessons in the mix for us to learn. So if you want to be in touch with me, simongilbo.com or any of the social media platforms. I want to give a big thank you to Adam Thomas Steer for the editing and Mike Sandeman for the mixing. I want to say a huge thank you to you, Martin. God bless you, bro.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me again.
Great stuff. And to all you lot, we'll see you next week for another fantastic guest. In the meantime, toodaloo.